Hi, everyone.
Hello again. On page, let's see now, 95 of the Proclaimer's book, we just had the opening of Gilead, the Missionary Training Center in 1943, and now the subtitle is Post-War Reorganizing. In May 1945, the hostilities of World War II in Europe came to an end. 4 months later, in September, the fighting ceased in the Pacific. World War II was over. On October 24th, 1945, a little over 3 years after the Society's president delivered the talk, Peace Can It Last, the Charter of the United Nations went into effect.
Reports about the activity of Jehovah's Witnesses had already begun trickling out of Europe to an extent that amazed their brothers and sisters around the world. The Kingdom Proclamation work had forged ahead in European countries in spite of the war. The Watchtower of July 15, 1945 reported, in 1940, France had 400 publishers. Now there are 1,100 that talk the kingdom. In 1940, Holland had 800 publishers. 400 of them were whisked off to concentration camps in Germany. Those left behind talked the kingdom. The result? In that land, there are now 2,000 kingdom publishers. The open door of freedom now presented opportunities of further declaring the good news, not just in Europe, but around the world. First, though, much reconstruction and reorganization were needed.
Anxious to survey the needs of Jehovah's Witnesses in the war-ravaged countries, the Society's president, along with his secretary Milton G. Henschel, set out on a tour of Britain, France, Switzerland, Belgium, and Netherlands, and Scandinavia in November 1945 to encourage the brothers and to inspect the branch offices of the Society. Their objective was post-war reorganization. Arrangements were made for literature supplies as well as food and clothing to be shipped to the brothers in need. Branch offices were re-established.
Brother KNORR well realized that good branch organization was needed to keep pace with the forward movement of preaching work. His natural abilities in organizing were fully used in expanding the Society's branch facilities worldwide. In 1942, when he became president, there were 25 branch offices. By 1946, despite the bans and hindrances of World War II, there were branches in 57 lands. Over the next 30 years, down to 1976, the number of branches increased to 97.
And more than half of the space in this page and a half covering this is devoted to pictures. Here's the pictures. 6 globes here on the left.
Oh, push it a little forward.
6 globes.
Yeah.
And depicting the work and building branches around the world during the decade, really, from the post-war period to about 1956. And then on the right, you have a picture of KNORR himself getting off a plane somewhere. And the emphasis here, I think, is at least on the organizational impetus that they've developed after the war, of course, when they've got more freedom to move around. But for me, that's the big missing, the elephant in the room here, really, is who has already done the work that enables you to do all of this now that the war is out of the way.
Yeah.
When you move into a new land and build a branch office there, what are you actually doing?
Yeah.
Are you pioneering something that's not been done before, or?
So the list of the ones that Henschel and KNORR go to visit in 1945 are all Christian nations. So they have the freedom to go there.
Holland, Germany, who are listed here now?
Britain, France, Switzerland, Belgium, Netherlands, and Scandinavia.
Yeah, so the early part of the work post-war is in lands that have been Christianized.
Yeah.
Some of them for many hundreds of years, but all of them before Russell Rutherford or Franz got there, or Nathan KNORR. So
But,
it's
yeah.
great. It is true that he's a great organization, man, and we've made a video about that.
But my first question when I looked at this was KNORR and his secretary, they go on planes, and it's under his picture it says that he traveled the world many times over.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he's not the missionary. So, you know, it seems to me that it's the missionaries that should be the ones doing the traveling across the world.
No, Russell and Rutherford both acknowledged that the missionary societies of Christendom in the previous 100 years or so before they came along had already done the work of planting missions all over the world.
Yeah.
And of course, what we need to say here, of course, is this is not the first time it had happened in the 19th century.
Yeah.
It had already happened in the early church, in the church that you call apostate Christendom, in the first 4, 5, 6 centuries of the Common Era. The church had already spread across the world and beyond the Middle East. It had gone further west, of course, to the end of Europe, and even into Britain. It had gone east, at least to India and China.
But the difference is it's the leaders that are the missionaries. They're not only the leaders, they're also the missionaries.
So in the early days,
Yeah.
it was the apostles and their co-workers who were the front lines of the missionary movement. They weren't just organizing it.
Yeah.
Which is a big difference when you think about what is being bragged upon here. It's a very impressive work if you take it out of historical context. But the point is it's already been done, and much of it's been done for 1,500 years or so before this starts.
Yeah. And even, when they do start here, they're going to places that have already been, had missionaries there. And those missionaries oftentimes faced danger when they went.
Extreme.
So you're going when there's not as much danger, when it's been tamed somewhat.
Tamed is a good way to think of it.
Yeah.
The missionaries of the 19th century, even though Christianity had penetrated into most parts of the world, the ones that were going to parts of Africa and the South Sea Islands faced cannibals.
Yeah.
That's already done before you get there.
That's right. So you're not doing the pioneering. Somebody else has done the pioneering. You're going where somebody else already did it.
And by the way, this is still the case, that even since the war, as much as Jehovah's Witnesses have increased from something like 100,000 to 8 million, there's now 80 million Christians in China, most of which has happened since World War II. And there's tens of millions in a place like Korea. And now we hear that there's an extraordinary explosion going on even in Muslim lands, especially Iran.
Yeah.
And in Africa too. Most Christians who are evangelical now are either in Africa or the Far East. Yeah. And
so what are their numbers like?
Yeah, look at the statistics of the Watchtower in their yearbooks, and you realize there are countries like the Middle East, the Muslim lands, where they haven't hardly penetrated. And as far as we can tell, of course, they've gone backwards in places like Russia. But their growth is great and has to be applauded if you think in terms of numbers anyway. But it's nothing compared to the growth in Christendom since World War II.
China, you mean? In China? Or you're talking
all of those
all
lands.
Of Christendom. Yeah.
So, your total numbers, 8 million publishers, looks impressive compared to 100,000 then. But Christendom is now 2.4 billion. And at least 1.5 billion of those have been added in the same period that you're growing.
Yeah. So the areas that Christendom has not been able to penetrate, the door's been closed. The witnesses have not been pioneers in opening the door there.
That's right.
And have Christendom follow them. No. Usually Christendom breaks through and then they follow.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's what we learned the hard way, right? You did a video on it.
Yeah, I did. Because I didn't know about the missionaries and what they faced. And it was alarming to me that I didn't know any of these people. Why doesn't the Watchtower talk about them? Why is it that they only say negative things about Christendom and never mention people who were willing to die to get the Bible and the good news to other people?
I think we did a fact check on in the index on David Livingstone, perhaps the most famous of all missionaries.
They have one reference to him, and it's
what
negative.
was it? It was a negative about the exploitation of Africa, right?
Yeah, as if he did that. He went there. He opened the way that other people could get in, but he went there to give them the gospel.
So you better explain why there are now hundreds of millions of Christians in Africa. And it's from people like David Livingstone being willing to put their life on the line.
Yeah, so
way more than 100 years ago.
That's what we'll link is the video about the great missionaries that we didn't know about when we were Jehovah's Witnesses.
See you next time.